The Third Eye by Tuesday Lobsang Rampa. Read to you by BlueFriend. Chapter 13. First Visit Home. We had arrived back in time for the Logsar, or New Year, ceremonies. Everything had to be cleaned, everywhere tidied. On the 15th day, the Dalai Lama went to the cathedral for a number of services. With them ended, he came out for his tour of the Barkor, the ring road which went outside the Jokang and Council Hall, round by the marketplace, and completed the circuit between the big business houses. At this time of the celebrations, the solemnity was being replaced by jollity. The gods were pleased, and now was the time for pleasure and enjoyment. Huge frameworks from 30 to 40 feet high supported images made of colored butter. Some of the frames had butter pictures in relief of various scenes from our sacred books. The Dalai Lama walked around and examined each one. The most attractive exhibit earned for the lamasery, making it the title of the best butter modelers of the year. We of Chakpori were not at all interested in these carnivals. It all seemed rather childish and unamusing to us. Nor were we interested in the other proceedings, when riderless horses raced across the plains of Lhasa in open competition. We were more interested in the giant figures representing characters from our legends. These figures were constructed on a light wooden framework to represent the body, and a very realistic, huge head was fitted. Inside the head were butter lamps which shone through the eyes, and, in flickering, appeared to make the eyes move from side to side. A strong monk on stilts would be inside the frame of the figure, with his eyes giving a very indifferent view through the giant's midsection. All kinds of unusual accidents would happen to these performers. The poor wretch would put one stilt in a pothole and find that he was balancing on one stilt, or one stilt would perhaps skid on some slippery substance on the road. One of the worst things was when the lamps were jerked loose and set fire to the whole figure. Once, in later years, I was persuaded to carry round the figure of Buddha, the god of medicine. It was 25 feet high. The flowing robes flapped around my stilted legs. Moths flapped around as well, for the garments had been stored. As I jerked along the road, dust was shaken from the folds, and I sneezed and sneezed and sneezed. Every time I did so, I felt that I was going to topple over. Every sneeze caused a further jerk, and added to my discomfort by spilling hot butter from the lamps over my shaven and suffering head. The heat was terrible. Swaths of moldy old clothes, swarms of bewildered moths, and hot butter. Normally, butter in a lamp is solid, with the exception of a little pool around the wick. Now, in this stifling heat, the whole lot had melted. The little peephole in the midsection of the figure was not in line with my eyes, and I could not let go of the stilts in order to rearrange it. All I could see was the back of the figure in front of me, and by the way it was hopping about and swaying, the poor wretch inside was having as bad a time as I. However, with the Dalai Lama watching, there was nothing to do but march on, suffocated with cloth, half roasted in butter fat. With the heat and exertion, I am sure I lost pounds of weight that day. A High Lama that night said, "Oh, Lobsang, your performance was good. You would be an excellent comedian." I certainly did not tell him that the antics which amused him so much were entirely involuntary. Most definitely I did not carry a figure again. Not long after this, I think it may have been 5 or 6 months, there was a sudden terrific gale of wind with flying clouds of dust and grit. I was on the roof of a storehouse being instructed in how to lay sheet gold to make the roof waterproof. The gale caught me and whirled me off the flat roof to bump first on another roof some 20 feet lower. Another gust caught me and blew me over the edge and over the side of the Iron Mountain and down to the side of the Lingkor Road some 350 feet below. The ground was swampy, and I landed with my face in the water. Something snapped, another branch, I thought. Dazedly, I tried to lift myself out of the mud, but found that the pain was intense when I tried to move my left arm or shoulder. Somehow I got to my knees, to my feet, and struggled along to the dry road. I felt sick with pain, and I could not think clearly. My sole thought was to get up the mountain as quickly as possible. Blindly I struggled and stumbled along until about halfway up I met a party of monks rushing down to see what had happened to me and to another boy. He had landed on rocks and so was dead. I was carried up the rest of the way to the room of my guide. Quickly he examined me. Oh, poor boys, they should not have been sent out in such a gale. He looked at me. "Well, Lobsang, you have a broken arm and a broken collarbone. We shall have to set them for you. It will hurt, but not more than I can help." While he was talking, and almost before I knew it, he had set the collarbone and bound splinting in place to hold the broken bones. The upper arm was more painful, but soon that too was set and splinted. For the rest of that day I did nothing but lie down. With the arrival of the next day, the Lama Mingyar Dondup said, "We cannot let you fall behind in studies, Lobsang, so you and I will study together here. Like all of us, you have a certain little dislike of learning new things, so I am going to remove that study antagonism hypnotically." He closed the shutters, and the room was in darkness, except for the faint light from the altar lamps. From somewhere he took a small box, which he stood on a shelf in front of me. I seemed to see bright lights, colored lights, hands and bars of color, and then all appeared to end in a silent explosion of brightness. It must have been many hours later when I awoke. The window again was open, but the purple shadows of night were beginning to fill the valley down below. From the Potala, little lights were twinkling in and around the buildings as the evening guard went around their duties, making sure that all was secure. I could look across the city where, too, the nightlife was now commencing. Just then my guide came in. "Oh," he said, "so you have returned to us at last. We thought that you found the astral fields so pleasant that you were staying a while. Now I suppose, as usual, you are hungry." As he mentioned that, I realized that I was, definitely. Food was soon brought, and as I ate, he talked. "By ordinary laws, you should have left the body, but your stars said you would live to die in the land of the Red Indians, or America. in many years' time. They are having a service for the one who did not stay. He was killed on the instant. It appeared to me that the ones who had passed over were the lucky ones. My own experiences in astral traveling had taught me that it was very pleasant, but then I reminded myself that we did not really like school, but we had to stay to learn things, and what was life on earth but a school? A hard one, too, I thought. Here am I with 2 broken bones, and I have to go on learning. For 2 weeks I had even more intensive teaching than usual. I was told it was to keep my mind from thinking of my broken bones. Now, at the end of the fortnight, they had united, but I was stiff, and both my shoulder and my arm were painful. The Lama, Mingyar Dondup, was reading a letter when I went into his room one morning. He looked up at me as I entered. "Lobsang," he said, "we have a packet of herbs to go to your honorable mother. You can take it tomorrow morning and stay the day." "I am sure my father would not want to see me," I answered. "He ignored me completely when he passed me on the steps of the Patala." "Yes, of course he did. He knew that you had just come from the Precious One. He knew that you had been specially favored, so he could not speak unless I was with you, because you are now my ward by order of the Precious One himself." He looked at me, and the corners of his eyes crinkled as he laughed. "Anyhow, your father will not be there tomorrow. He has gone to Yangtze for several days." In the morning, my guide looked me over and said, "You look a little pale, but you are clean and tidy, and that should count a lot with a mother. Here is the scarf. Don't forget that you are now a Lama and must conform to all the rules. You came here on foot. Today you will ride on one of our best white horses. Take mine, it needs some exercise." The leather bag of herbs, handed to me as I left, had been wrapped in a silk scarf as a sign of respect. I looked at it dubiously, wondering how I was going to keep the wretched thing clean. In the end, I took off the scarf and tucked it into my robe pouch until I was nearer home. Down the steep hill we went, the white horse and I. Halfway down, the horse stopped, turned his head around to get a good look at me. Apparently, he did not think much of what he saw, because he gave a loud neigh and hurried on as if he could not bear the sight of me any longer. I sympathized with him, as I had identical opinions about him. In Tibet, the most orthodox lamas ride mules, as they are supposed to be sexless affairs. Lamas who are not so finicky ride a male horse or pony. For myself, I preferred to walk if at all possible. At the bottom of the hill, we turned right. I sighed with relief. The horse agreed with me that we should turn right. Probably because one always traverses the Linga road in a clockwise direction for religious reasons. So we turned right and crossed the Drepung City Road to continue along the Linga circuit. Along past the Potala, which I thought was not to be compared to our Chakpori for attractiveness, and across the road to India, leaving the Kaling Chu on our left and the Snake Temple on our right. At the entrance to my former home, a little way farther on, servants saw me coming and hastened to swing open the gates. Straight into the courtyard I rode, with a swagger and a hope that I would not fall off. A servant held the horse, fortunately, while I slid off. Gravely, the steward and I exchanged our ceremonial scarves. "Bless this house, and all that be in it, Honorable Medical Lama, sir," said the steward. "May the blessing of Buddha, the Pure One and All-Seeing One, be upon you and keep you healthy," I replied. "Honorable sir, the mistress of the house commands me lead you to her." So off we went, as if I could not have found my own way, with me fumbling to wrap up the bag of herbs with that wretched scarf again. Upstairs in my mother's best room, I was never allowed in here when I was merely a son, I thought. My second thought was to wonder if I should turn and run for it. The room was full of women. Before I could, my mother came towards me and bowed. "Honorable sir and son, my friends are here to hear of your account of the honor conferred upon you by the Precious One." "Honorable mother," I replied, "the rules of my order prevent me from saying what the Precious One told me. The Lama Mingyar Dandap instructed me to bring you this bag of herbs and to present you with his scarf of greeting." "Honorable Lama and son, these ladies have traveled far to hear of the events of the inmost house and of the Precious One within. Does he really read Indian magazines? And is it true that he has a glass which he can look through and see through the walls of a house?" "Madam," I answered, "I am but a poor medical lama who has recently returned from the hills. It is not for such as I to speak of the doings of the head of our order. I have come only as a messenger." A young woman came up to me and said, "Don't you remember me? I am Yaso." To be truthful, I hardly could recognize her, she had developed so much and was so ornamental. I had misgivings. 9 women were too much of a problem for me. Men now, I knew how to deal with them, but women? They looked at me as if I were a juicy morsel, and they hungry wolves on the plains. There was but one course of action: retreat. "Honorable Mother," I said, "I have delivered my message, and now I must return to my duties. I have been ill, and have much to do." With that, I bowed to them, turned, and made off as fast as I decently could. The steward had returned to his office, and the groom brought out the horse. "Help me to mount carefully," I said, "for I have recently had an arm and a shoulder broken, and I cannot manage alone." The groom opened the gate. I rode out just as Mother appeared on the balcony and shouted something. The white horse turned left so that we could travel again clockwise around the Linga road. Slowly I rode along, slowly as I did not want to get back too quickly. Past Yingpo Linga, past Muro Gompa, and along the complete circuit. Once again home on the Iron Mountain, I went to the Lama Mingyar Dandap. He looked at me. "Why, Lobsang, have all the wandering ghosts chased you around the city? You look shaken." "Shaken?" I answered. "Shaken? My mother had a batch of women there, and they all wanted to know about the inmost one and what he said to me. I told them the rules of the order would not allow me to say, and I made off while I was safe, all those women staring at me." My guide shook and shook with laughter. The more I stared at him in amazement, the more he laughed. "The Precious One wanted to know if you had settled down, or if you still had thoughts of home." Lamastic life had upset my social values. Women were strange creatures to me, and they still are. But I am home. Oh, no, I do not want to return to the house of my father. The sight of those women, painted, stuff on their hair, and the way they looked at me, as if I were a prize sheep and they butchers from show. Screeching voices, and their astral colors, dreadful. Oh, Honorable Lama, do not let us discuss it. For days I was not allowed to forget it. Oh, Lobsang, put to flight by a pack of women. Or, Lobsang, I want you to go to your honorable mother. She has a party today and they need entertaining. But after a week, I was again told that the Dalai Lama was very, very interested in me and had arranged for me to be sent home when my mother had one of her numerous social parties. No one ever obstructed the precious one. We all loved him, not merely as a god on earth, but as the true man that he was. His temper was a bit hasty, but so was mine, and he never let personal bias interfere with the duties of the state. Nor did he stay in a temper for more than minutes. He was the supreme head of state and church. End of chapter 13. The Third Eye by Tuesday Lobsang Rampa. Read to you by BlueFriend. Chapter 14. Using the Third Eye. One morning, when I was at peace with the world and wondering how to fill an idle half hour before the next service, the Lama Mingyar Dondap came to me. "Let us take a walk," Lobsang. "I have a small job for you to do." I jumped to my feet, glad to be going out with my guide. It did not take us long to get ready, and then we set off. As we were leaving the temple, one of the cats displayed marked affection, and we could not leave him until the roaring purr had stopped and the tail started to wag. This was a huge cat. We called him Cat, in Tibetan, of course, and that was she-me. Satisfied that his affection was fully reciprocated, he walked solemnly beside us until we were halfway down the mountain. Then apparently he remembered that he had left the jewels unguarded, and off he rushed in a very great hurry. Our temple cats were not for ornament only. They were fierce guardians of the masses of uncut gems strewn around the holy figures. In houses, dogs were the guardians, immense mastiffs who would pull a man down and savage him. These dogs could be cowed and driven off, but not so with the cats. Once they attacked, only death could stop them. They were of the type sometimes named Siamese. Tibet is cold, so these cats were nearly black. In hot countries, so I've been told, they are white, the temperature affecting the fur color. Their eyes were blue, and their hind legs were long, giving them a different appearance when they walked. Their tails were long and whip-like, and their voices, no cat ever had a voice like these. The volume and range of tones was almost beyond belief. On duty, these cats prowled in the temples, silent-footed and alert, like dark shadows of the night. If anyone tried to reach the jewels, which were otherwise unguarded, a cat would emerge and leap at the man's arm. Unless he let go immediately, another cat would jump, perhaps from the holy image, straight at the thief's throat. And these cats had claws twice as long as those of the average cat, and they did not let go. Dogs could be beaten off or perhaps held or poisoned. Not so with the cats. They would put the fiercest mastiffs to flight. Only men who personally knew these cats could approach them when they were on duty. We sauntered on. Down at the road we turned right through the Pargo Kaling and walked on past the village of Shou, on over the turquoise bridge, and right again at the house of Doring. This brought us to the side of the old Chinese mission. As we walked, the Lama Mingyar Dondup talked to me. "A Chinese mission has arrived, as I told you. Let us have a look at them and see what they are like." My first impression was a very unfavorable one. Inside the house, the men were pacing about, arrogantly unpacking boxes and cases. They appeared to have enough weapons to supply a small army. Being a small boy, I could investigate in a manner which was quite unsuitable for an older person. I crept through the grounds and silently approached an open window. For a time I stood and watched until one of the men looked up and saw me. He uttered a Chinese oath which threw grave doubts upon my ancestry, but left none whatever about my future. He reached for something, so I withdrew before he could throw it. On the Linkor road again, I said to my guide, "Oh, how their auras turned red, and they wave knives about so." For the rest of the way home, the Lama Mingyar Dondup was thoughtful. After our supper, he said to me, "I have been thinking quite a lot about these Chinese. I am going to suggest to the Precious One that we make use of your special abilities. Do you feel confident that you can watch them through a screen if it could be arranged?" All I could say was, "If you think I can do it, then I can." The next day I did not see my guide at all, but the following day he taught me in the morning, and after the midday meal he said, "We will take a walk this afternoon, Lobsang. Here is a scarf of the first quality, so you do not need to be a clairvoyant to know where we are going. 10 minutes to get yourself ready, and then meet me in my room. I have to go and see the abbot first." Once again, we set off on the precipitous path down the mountainside. We took a shortcut down over the southwest side of our mountain, and after a very short walk, arrived at the Norbu linga. The Dalai Lama was very fond of this jewel park and spent most of his free time there. The Patala was a beautiful place outside, but inside it was stuffy through insufficient ventilation and too many butter lamps burning for too long. Much butter had been spilled on the floors throughout the years, and it was not a new experience for a dignified Lama to pursue his stately way down a sloping ramp, tread on a lump of butter covered in dust, and arrive at the bottom of the ramp with an "oop" of astonishment as part of his anatomy hit the stone flooring. The Dalai Lama did not wish to risk being the subject of such an unedifying spectacle, so he stayed at the Norbu linga whenever possible. This jewel park was surrounded by a stone wall some 12 feet high. The park is only about 100 years old. The palace within had golden turrets and consisted of 3 buildings, which were used for official and state work. An inner enclosure, which also had a high wall, was used by the Dalai Lama as a pleasure garden. Some people have written that officials were forbidden to enter this enclosure. That definitely is not so. They were forbidden to do any official business within the enclosure. I have been there some 30 times and know it well. It contained a very beautiful artificial lake with 2 islands, upon which there were 2 summer houses. At the northwest corner, a wide stone causeway enabled one to reach the islands and the summer house on each. The Dalai Lama spent much time on one or the other of these islands, and spent many hours each day in meditation there. Inside the park there were barracks, which housed some 500 men, who acted as personal bodyguards. It was to this place that the Lama Mingyar Dondap was taking me. This was my first visit. We walked through the very beautiful land and through an ornamental gateway leading to the inner enclosure. All manner of birds were pecking food from the ground as we entered, and they took no notice of us. We had to get out of their way. The lake was placid, like a highly polished metal mirror. The stone causeway had been newly whitewashed, and we made our way to the farthest island, where the inmost one was sitting in deep meditation. At our approach, he looked up and smiled. We knelt and laid our scarves at his feet, and he told us to sit in front of him. He rang a bell for the buttered tea, without which no Tibetan could carry on a discussion. While we were waiting for it to be brought, he told me of the various animals he had in the park, and promised that I should see them later. With the arrival of the tea and the departure of the Lama attendant, the Dalai Lama looked at me and said, "Our good friend Mingyar tells me that you do not like the auric colors of the Chinese delegation. He says that they have many weapons upon their persons. In all the tests, secret and otherwise, upon your clairvoyance, you have never failed. What is your opinion of these men?" This did not make me happy. I did not like telling others, except the Lama Mingyar Dondap, what I saw in the colors and what they meant to me. In my reasoning, if a person could not see for himself, then he was not meant to know. But how does one say that to the head of a state, particularly to a head who was not clairvoyant? To the Dalai Lama, my reply was, "Honorable precious protector, I am quite unskilled in the reading of foreign auras. I am unworthy to express an opinion." This did not get me anywhere. The inmost one replied, "As one possessed of special talents, further increased by the ancient arts, it is your duty to say. You have been trained to that end. Now say what you saw." Honorable precious protector, these men have evil intentions. The colors of their auras show treachery. That was all I said. The Dalai Lama looked satisfied. "Good. You have repeated it as you told Mingyar. You will conceal yourself behind that screen tomorrow and watch when the Chinese are here. We must be sure. Conceal yourself now, and we will see if you are adequately hidden." I was not, so attendants were called, and the Chinese lions were shifted slightly, that I might be entirely concealed. Lamas came in rehearsals as if they were the visiting delegation. They tried hard to locate my hiding place. I caught the thought of one. Promotion for me if I can see him. But he did not get promotion, as he was looking on the wrong side. Eventually, the inmost one was satisfied and called me out. He spoke for a few moments and then told us to come again tomorrow, as the Chinese delegation were going to visit him in an attempt to force a treaty upon Tibet. So with that thought before us, we took our leave of the inmost one and wended our way up the Iron Mountain. The following day, at about the 11th hour, we again descended the rocky slope and made our entrance to the inner enclosure. The Dalai Lama smiled upon me and said that I must eat. I was ready for that, before secreting myself. At his order, some very palatable food was brought to the Lama Mingyar Dondap and me. Food imported from India in tins. I do not know what they were called. I only know that they were very welcome change from tea, zampa, and turnip. Well fortified, I was able to face the prospect of several hours' immobility more cheerfully. Utter immobility was a simple matter to me, and to all lamas. We had to keep still in order to meditate. From a very early age, from 7 years of age to be precise, I had been taught to sit motionless for hours on end. A lighted butter lamp used to be balanced on my head, and I had to remain in the lotus attitude until the butter was finished. This could be as long as 12 hours, so now 3 or 4 hours imposed no hardship. Directly in front of me, the Dalai Lama sat in the lotus attitude on his throne 6 feet above the floor. He and I remained motionless. From without the walls came hoarse cries and many exclamations in Chinese. Afterwards, I discovered that the Chinese had had suspicious bulges under their robes, so they had been searched for weapons. Now they were permitted to enter the inner enclosure. We saw them coming, being led in by the household guards, across the causeway and on to the porch of the pavilion. A high Lama intoned, "Om Mani Padme Om," and the Chinaman, instead of repeating the same mantra as a courtesy, used the Chinese form, "Omi Tofo," meaning, "Hear us, O Amida Buddha." I thought to myself, well, Lobsang, your work is easy. They show their true colors. As I looked at them from my place of concealment, I observed the shimmering of their auras, the opalescent sheen shot with murky red, the turgid swirling of hate-filled thoughts, bands and striations of colors, unpleasant colors, not the clear, pure shades of higher thought, but the unwholesome, contaminated hues of those whose life forces are devoted to materialism and evil doing. They were those of whom we say, "Their speech was fair, but their thoughts were foul." I also watched the Dalai Lama. His colors indicated sadness. Sadness as he remembered the past when he had been to China. All that I saw of the inmost one I liked, the best ruler ever of Tibet. He had a temper, quite a hot one, and then his colors did flash red, but history will record that there was never a better Dalai Lama, one who was utterly devoted to his country. Certainly, I thought of him with very great affection, second only to the Lama Mingyar Dondap, for whom I felt more than affection. But the interview dragged on to its useless end. Useless because these men did not come in friendship, but in enmity. Their one thought was to get their own way and not be too particular about the methods they employed. They wanted territories. They wanted to guide the policy of Tibet. They wanted gold. This latter had been a lure to them for years past. There are hundreds of tons of gold in Tibet. We regard it as a sacred metal. According to our belief, ground is desecrated when gold is mined, so it is left quite untouched. From certain streams one can pick up nuggets which have been washed down from the mountains. In the Changtang region, I have seen gold on the sides of swift-flowing streams, as sand is seen on the banks of ordinary streams. We melt down some of these nuggets or sand and make temple ornament, sacred metal for sacred uses. Even butter lamps are made of gold. Unfortunately, the metal is so soft that ornaments are easily distorted. Tibet is about 8 times the size of the British Isles. Large areas are practically unexplored, but from my own travels with Lama Mingyar Dondap, I know there is gold, silver, and uranium. We have never permitted Western peoples to survey in spite of their fevered attempts, because of the old legend, where the men of the West go, there goes war. It should be remembered, when reading of gold trumpets, gold dishes, gold-covered lies, that gold is not a rare metal in Tibet, but a sacred one. Tibet could be one of the great storehouses of the world if mankind would work together in peace instead of so much useless striving for power. One morning, the Lama Mingyar Dondap came in to me where I was copying an old manuscript ready for the carvers. Lobsang, you will have to leave that for now. The Precious One has sent for us. We have to go to Norbu linga, and together, unseen, we have to analyze the color of some foreigner from the Western world. You must hurry to get ready. The Precious One wants to see us first. No scarves, no ceremony, only speed. So that was that. I gaped at him for a moment, then jumped to my feet. A clean robe, Honorable Lama Master, and I am ready. It did not take me long to make myself look passably tidy. Together we set off down the hill on foot. The distance was about half a mile. At the bottom of the mountain, just by the spot where I had fallen and broken my bones, we went over a little bridge and reached the Lingor road. This we crossed and reached the gate of the Norbu linga, or Jewel Park, as it is sometimes translated. The guards were just about to warn us off when they saw that the Lama Mingyar Dondap was with me. Then their attitudes changed completely. We were quickly shown into the inner garden where the Dalai Lama was sitting on a veranda. I felt a little foolish, having no scarf to present and not knowing how to behave without it. The inmost one looked up with a smile. "Oh, sit down, Mingyar. You too, Lobsang. You have certainly hurried." We sat down and waited for him to speak. He meditated for some time, seeming to marshal his thoughts in an orderly array. "Some time ago," he said, "the army of the Red Barbarians," which were the British, invaded our sacred land. I went to India, and from thence travelled most extensively. In the year of the Iron Dog, which was 1910, the Chinese invaded us as a direct result of the British invasion. I again went to India, and there I met the man with whom we are to meet today. I say all this for you, Lobsang, for Mingyar was with me. The British made promises and they were not kept. Now I want to know if this man speaks with one or two tongues. You, Lobsang, will not understand his speech, and so will not be influenced by it. From this lattice screen, you and another will watch unobserved. Your presence will not be known. You will write down your astral color impressions as taught by our guide, who speaks so well of you. Now, show him to his place, Mingyar, for he is more use to you than to me, and, I do believe, he considers the Lama Mingyar Dondap to be superior to the Dalai Lama. Behind the lattice screen, I had grown tired of looking about, tired of watching the birds and the waving of branches of the trees. Now and then I took surreptitious nibbles at some tsampa which I had with me. Clouds drifted across the sky, and I thought how nice it would be to feel the sway and tremor of a kite beneath me, with the rushing wind whistling through the fabric and thrumming on the rope. Suddenly I jumped, as there was a crash. For a moment I thought I was in a kite and had fallen asleep and out. But no, the gate to the inner garden had been flung open, and golden-robed lamas of the household escorted in a most extraordinary sight. I was hard put to keep silent. I wanted to explode with laughter. A man, a tall, thin man, white hair, white face, scanty eyebrows, and deep-sunk eyes, quite a hard mouth, but his dress! Blue cloth of some sort, with a whole row of knobs down the front, shiny knobs. Apparently some very bad tailor had made the clothes, for the collar was so big that it had to be folded over. It was folded over certain patches on the sides, too. I thought that the Westerners must have some symbolic patches, like those we used in imitation of Buddha. Pockets meant nothing to me in those days, nor did folded collars. In Tibet, those who have no need to do manual work have long sleeves, which completely hide the hands. This man had short sleeves, reaching only to his wrists. Yet he cannot be a laborer, I thought, for his hands look too soft. Perhaps he does not know how to dress. But this poor fellow's robe ended where his legs joined his body. Poor, very poor, I thought. His trousers were too tight in the leg and too long, for the bottoms were turned up. He must feel terrible looking like that in front of the inmost one, I thought. I wonder if someone his size will lend him proper clothes. Then I looked at his feet. Very, very strange. He had some curious black things on them, shiny things, shiny as if they were covered with ice. Not boots of felt such as we wear, no. I decided that I would never see anything stranger than this. Quite automatically, I was writing down the colors I saw and making notes of my own interpretation of them. Sometimes the man spoke in Tibetan, quite good for a foreigner, then lapsed into the most remarkable collection of sounds that I had never heard. English, as they told me afterwards when I again saw the Dalai Lama. The man amazed me by reaching into one of the patches at his side and bringing out a piece of white cloth. Before my astounded eyes, he put this cloth over his mouth and nose and made it sound like a small trumpet. Some sort of a salute to the precious one, I thought. Salute over, he carefully put away the cloth behind the patch. He fiddled about with other patches and brought out various papers of a type I had not seen before. White, thin, smooth paper, not like ours, which was buff, thick, and rough. How can one possibly write on that, I thought. There is nothing to scrape away. The crayon, things would just slide off. The man took from behind one of his patches a thin stick of painted wood with what looked like soot in the middle. With this he made the strangest squiggles I had ever imagined. I thought he could not write and was just pretending to by making these markings. Soot? Who ever heard of anyone writing with a streak of soot? Just let him blow on it and see the soot fly off. He was obviously a cripple because he had to sit on a wooden framework which rested on 4 sticks. He sat down on the frame and let his legs hang over the edge. I thought that his spine must have been damaged because 2 more sticks from the frame on which he sat supported it. By now I was feeling really sorry for him. Ill-fitting clothes, inability to write, showing off by blowing a trumpet from his pocket, and now, to make it even stranger, he could not sit properly, but had to have his back supported and his legs dangling. He fidgeted a lot, crossing and uncrossing his legs. At one time, to my horror, he tipped the left foot so that his sole was pointing at the Dalai Lama, a terrible insult if done by a Tibetan, but he soon remembered and uncrossed his legs again. The inmost one did great honor to this man, for he also sat on one of these wooden frames and let his legs hang over. The visitor had a most peculiar name. He was called Female Musical Instrument, and he had 2 decorations in front of it. Now I should refer to him as Mr. C. A. Bell. By his auric colors I judged him to be in poor health, most probably caused by living in a climate to which he was not suited. He appeared genuine in his desire to be helpful, but it was obvious from his colors that he was afraid of annoying his government and of having his after-work pension affected. He wanted to take one course, but his government was not willing, so he had to say one thing and hope that his opinions and suggestions would be proven correct by time. We knew a lot about this Mr. Bell. We had all the data, his birth time, and various highlights in his career with which one could plot his course of events. The astrologers discovered that he had previously lived in Tibet and had, during his last life, expressed the wish to reincarnate in the West in the hope of assisting in an understanding between East and West. I have recently been given to understand that he mentions this in some book that he has written. Certainly, we felt that if he had been able to influence his government in the way he desired, there would have been no communist invasion of my country. However, the forecasts decreed that there would be such an invasion, and the predictions are never wrong. The English government seemed to be very suspicious. They thought that Tibet was making treaties with Russia. This did not suit them. England would not make a treaty with Tibet, nor was she willing for Tibet to make friends with anyone else. Sikkim, Bhutan, anywhere but Tibet, could have treaties, but not Tibet. So the English became hot under their peculiar collars in an attempt to invade us or strangle us. They did not mind which. This Mr. Bell, who was on the spot, saw that we had no desire to side with any nation. We wanted to stay on our own, to live life in our own way, and keep clear of all dealings with foreigners who, in the past, had brought us nothing but trouble, loss, and hardship. The inmost one was pleased indeed with my remarks after this Mr. Bell had left, but he thought of me in terms of more work. "Yes, yes," he exclaimed, "we must develop you even more, Lobsang. You will find it of the utmost use when you go to the far countries. We will have you given more hypnotic treatment. We must cram in all the knowledge that we can." He reached for his bell and rang for one of his attendants. "Mingyar Dondup, I want him here now," he said. A few minutes later my guide appeared and made his leisurely way across. Not for anyone would that Lama hurry, and the Dalai Lama knew him as a friend and so did not try to hasten him. My guide sat beside me in front of the Precious One. An attendant hurried along with more buttered tea and things from India to eat. When we were settled, the Dalai Lama said, "Mingyar, you were correct. He has ability. He can be developed still more, Mingyar, and he must be. Take whatever steps you consider necessary so that he is trained as quickly and as thoroughly as possible. Use any and all of our resources, for, as we have so often warned, evil times will come upon our country, and we must have someone who can compile the record of the ancient arts." So the tempo of my days were increased. Often from this time I was sent for in a hurry to interpret the colors of some person, perhaps that of a learned abbot from a far distant lamasery, or a civil leader of some remote province. I became a well-known visitor to the Potala and to the Norbu linga. In the former, I was able to make use of the telescopes which I so enjoyed, particularly one large astronomical model on a heavy tripod. With this, late at night, I would spend hours watching the moon and the stars. The Lama, Mingyar Dondup, and I frequently went into Lhasa city to observe visitors. His own considerable powers of clairvoyance and his wide knowledge of people enabled him to check and develop my own statements. It was most interesting to go to the stall of a trader and hear the man speak loud in praise of his wares and compare them with his thoughts, which to us were not so private. My memory, too, was developed. For long hours I listened to involved passages and then had to say them back. For unknown periods of time I lay in a hypnotic trance while people read to me passages from our oldest scriptures. End of chapter 14.